Hey everybody, my name is VA, and we're going to be doing a quick video today that I thought would be kind of fun to do. I know the whole tier list meme's a little bit outdated at this point, but I had the idea to do a tier list including all the servants from Fate Apocrypha, Fate Zero, and Fate Stay Night, which includes all three routes. So that's Heaven's Feel, Unlimited Blade Works, and the Dean/Fate route. I know those aren't the same thing, don't chew me out in the comments. Yeah, basically I've set up a tier list here with the normal tiers, that being S, A, B, C, D, E. I had to add E in, but E's also there. And then there's the jail tier. And I think anybody who knows the servants we're going to have on here knows exactly who goes in this tier. But we're going to go ahead and start ranking. So, before I actually do that, I want to set up a rule set here. I'm not doing this based on strength of the servants or their 5-star ranking or whatever. I'm just doing this based on how much I like these characters, be that based on the shows they were in or the supplemental material or whatever you want to count for that. In my case, I will be ranking them primarily based off of their appearances in the shows, but I have a little bit of a bias toward a few other characters, and you'll see that as we go. I'm going to start with the Apocrypha characters, then go into Zero, then go into Stay Night. So, to start us off, we're going to go with the Sabers from Fate Apocrypha. Siegfried is a character that I have a hard time ranking. And the reason that's the case is because I really, really, really like Siegfried, and anyone who knows me knows it. Like, I have an NP5, Bond 10, 10, 10, 10, level 100 Siegfried in Fate Grand Order and everything. I actually rolled a 6th one of him the other day. But while I do love this character, I acknowledge that a big reason I like him is because of his design and because of liking him in Fate Grand Order. I am ready to acknowledge that he was not very well handled in Fate Apocrypha. So while I do love Siegfried, I'm still putting him in B tier, because in Fate Apocrypha, he was pretty poorly used, despite the fact that I do love him and I think he's a great character and everything. I acknowledge most of the reason I like him is because of my own bias, his design, and Fate Grand Order. Now, Mordred is going straight to S tier, because she is the best part of Fate Apocrypha. I have talked to multiple people who all say Mordred should have been the main character. I am one of those people, actually. I was highly disappointed when they changed Mordred to just a supporting character after only a couple of episodes of her being in the spotlight. I understand why the show was structured that way. I know the novels probably did it that way too, but it doesn't really work as well in the anime, I don't think, especially considering that she's one of the most compelling characters in there. And her voice performances are just fantastic. I think that both Miyuki Sawashiro and Erika Lindbeck did a fantastic job as her in both the sub and the dub. But she's straight to S tier, no questions. Karna, I'm going to put in A tier, because I think that a lot of his characterization is very subtle and well done. I like him a lot in the show, and I had a joke while Fate Apocrypha was still running on air that every time Karna showed up, the animation budget just doubled. But I do think that he was a little bit underexplored. If he had been better explored, then he would be going straight from A up to S tier. But because he was not, I'm keeping him in A tier, because while I think he was less sloppily handled than someone like Siegfried, I still do wish he did a bit more in the show, besides what he did. Not to say that he didn't do enough, but I do wish his character was a bit more thoroughly explored in terms of his wishes and his desires and everything. Vlad is another easy A tier, if not S. If I could put someone in the middle here, I definitely would. But Vlad is just as good as Karna. I think that he's extremely well written. And I love his gimmick of wanting to destroy the Dracula novel, because it sort of craps all over what he wants people's perception of him to be. I really do think he's one of my favorite characters in Fate Apocrypha. The only thing keeping him below S tier is that I think Mordred is infinitely more enjoyable than him. Which I think that if Mordred's the standard for S tier, then that should be a bit more difficult to get to. Semiramis, that's a pretty easy B tier for me, if not A, but I'm going to keep her in B just for simplicity's sake. I think that Semiramis is a very fun character, very interesting one, who I do wish her dynamic with Shiro was better explored, because she's one of those characters that didn't get as much exploration as other people on the same cast, because Fate Apocrypha was so bloated and didn't spend enough time doing character exploration. But I do like her a lot. She has a fantastic design. She's honestly right up there. I think she's actually probably handled better than Siegfried, so I'm just going to do that. Not that the order really here matters. I just felt that was necessary. Jack is D tier. And I'm saying that because I like the idea behind her character, and I think that most of the writing for Jack was fine, but holy god, that design is just terrible. The first Fate Grand Order Ascension is better than her Apocrypha design, but then it goes right back to being the same thing after Ascension 1 Beyond. But yeah, no, Jack is easy D tier, if not E. The only reason I'm keeping her in D tier is because I do like her writing. And I think that her design is easy to improve. Like, if they just did what I did with Fate Apocrypha and just gave her, like, a black, like, suit that goes over the parts of her, like, body that are exposed, I wouldn't care. But I really don't like her design at all. I think it's far too exposed for a child. So, Jack is staying in D tier. Avisabron is going to be probably a D tier as well. And I'm saying that because, unlike Jack, he's just poorly written. Avisabron is very ill-explored, he doesn't do enough in the show, and he's very stilted and wooden in terms of the things he actually wants and does. I really don't like him all that much. He didn't leave a very good impression. And I think that's one of the worst things a character can do is just be forgettable. I think that he really didn't deserve to be an antagonist for any amount of time. He did not earn that. And honestly, I didn't feel anything when he was gone because he just didn't leave enough of an impression on me. Speaking of first impressions, Shakespeare is going straight up to S tier. And I'm saying that because Shakespeare is such a fun character. He's just a blast to watch on screen. I have never had more fun watching a character in Fate than I have watching him just be a total goofball, and I love characters like that. I understand he's a bastard, but he's a bastard that I like watching. So next up is Astolfo, and I'm going to put Astolfo in B tier. Because Astolfo has some really good writing behind him or them, depending on the writer. But it's just that I don't like how inconsistently handled Astolfo is between Fate Grand Order and Fate Apocrypha. There's some stuff that different writers have handled very differently without any real explanation. But I do think Astolfo is an incredibly written character. It's just that there's certain things holding Astolfo back from being as good as they could be. Now, Achilles, I'm going to put up in A tier, because I really do think that Achilles has some of the most fun dynamics in Apocrypha, and I think that he's just, he's really fun. He has some cool noble phantasms that add some really nice concepts to the show, and he's one of those characters I wish I'd seen more of, but then I'm satisfied with the amount I got. Next on to Shiro, and Shiro, I'm going to put in C. And I say that because I don't think Shiro was well explored in the anime at all. I think that they very much skipped story beats to keep the pacing of the show, and because of that, Shiro lost a lot of the depth he would have otherwise had. And it really does hurt his character like that, because from what I've heard described in the novels and everything, I think Shiro would be a fantastic antagonist in the show, but he's just not well enough explored, and because of that, I'm keeping him in C tier. As for Jean, I'm going to go ahead and put her in B. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff about her character that could have been explored, but wasn't. But at the same time, they do explore her a lot in Fate Grand Order, and I appreciate that. So I'm keeping her in B tier, up there with Astolfo and Siegfried and Semiramis, as one of those characters that had a lot of potential, but despite having the screen time to accomplish it, did not have a lot of depth to her. I think she had a very interesting base concept, and that should have been explored more. Fran, I am going to put right up there in B for the exact same reasons as Jean. Because I love Fran. I think she has one of the best designs in Fate Apocrypha. And I think her writing was going in a good direction, but then the motion of it got lost. And again, Fate Grand Order has made me appreciate her a lot more. And so has my friend Fi's Twitter account, Frankensays. But at the same time, I really don't think Fran was that well explored in Fate Apocrypha. And I wish we had seen more of her. I wish she hadn't gone away at the time in the show that she did, and I wish that her impact had been felt a little bit more. Spartacus is, I'm hovering between C and D, because at the same time, while Spartacus did basically nothing of consequence, and didn't really accomplish anything even after he was set aside for the second time. At the same time, he was super fun to watch. So, I'm going to put him in C. Because he is the exact opposite problem of Shiro. He did almost nothing in the story, whereas Shiro did a lot of stuff in the story. But he was fun to watch and Shiro wasn't, because Shiro wasn't explained well enough and Spartacus was very straightforward. Alonza is a tough call between C and B for me. I'm putting her in C exclusively because, especially the later the series went on, her writing became significantly less focused. And I love Alonza. I think she's one of my favorite Fate characters, actually, but at the same time, I acknowledge that she's not a particularly well-written character in terms of what she wants and how she tries to get it. I think especially in the later half of Fate Apocrypha, her dynamic with Jack is very rushed and not well explored at all, and I really don't like how she's handled in general in the last arc. Now, the last Fate Apocrypha servant is Chiron, and I'm putting him, again, in B tier, because he is pretty well explored, and I think he's a fun, interesting character, but at the same time, he's not very consistently handled. There's just a couple things about him that I don't think were that well done, but his dynamic with Achilles is fantastic, and I think that alone puts him in A tier. Puts him in B tier, I should say. It brings him up from C. Now, on to Fate Zero's characters. Prepare for a lot of S tiers. Diarmuid is an easy A tier. I love the guy. He's very well written, very well explored, and just generally, I think that his character is fantastic and very interesting. I think he creates some very interesting dynamics with other characters in the show, and that is what a great character does. Saber, again, straight up to an A tier, because her theme of being a king is incredibly well explored, and how that contrasts against the other two kings in the series. Speaking of which, Iskandar, S tier. Gilgamesh, A tier. Gilgamesh is a fantastically crafted antagonist. Ryder is my favorite character in Fate Zero. I love all three of the kings in Fate Zero. I think they're incredibly well handled. Hassan of the Hundred Faces is honestly just kind of meh to me. I like her in Fate Grand Order, but at the same time, I think that Hassan of the Hundred Faces was just not particularly well done in Fate Zero, because she makes for an incredible fake-out in the early parts of the series, but at the same time, she does, accomplish nothing in the long run. And it makes that fake-out kind of pointless in the long term because of that. Gilgamesh is going to jail, as both a caster and a Saber, because, I put Saber here because of Apocrypha, but I refuse to acknowledge that he's good because he's a horrible person. But he is a well-crafted antagonist. I appreciate him. In all actuality, he probably belongs in A or B tier. But I'm keeping him in jail because that's where he belongs. Lancelot, again, S tier. I think he was an incredible fake-out. I love his abilities. I love his noble phantasm. And I think that his dynamic with Arturia is wonderful. I think the restraint in not showing who he was for as long as they held back on that was very well done, and I appreciate him a lot. If not S tier, he maybe belongs in A, but I'm putting him in S tier because I just love him. Now, Stay Night. You may notice I put Saber on here again, and that's because in Unlimited Blade Works, at least, she accomplishes nothing. And even in Dean, she's nowhere near as well written, I think, as she was in Zero. Because of that, I am ranking her down to a C tier. If not, maybe a B, but I'm putting her in C just so I have a rank for her. Because she just doesn't do enough. And that's a little bit frustrating because she was so good in Fate Zero, but in Stay Night, she just doesn't really accomplish much of anything. And I know Stay Night came first, but that doesn't, mitigate my problem. Saber Alter, however, as she appears in Heaven's Feel, easily back up there as an A tier. I think the idea of exploring King Arthur's dark side is a wonderful way to flesh out her character, and it adds a lot of depth to her that Stay Night otherwise did not give. So I'm putting her in A tier. She might be B, but I'm putting her in A tier. Now, Gilgamesh and Stay Night, I think belongs in B tier. He's easily not as cool as Gilgamesh was in Fate Zero. I think that he's just a very generic, not particularly well-written villain in Stay Night, and I know that's because he was corrupted by the Grail, but I wish he was more like he was in Fate Zero. Matter of fact, no, screw B. I'm putting him in C, because I just do not like much of how he appears in Stay Night at all. I think he's still a kind of interesting character, but he's nowhere near as fun as he was in Fate Zero anymore. Medea, I'm putting in B, because I do think she's a pretty well-written character. I do like her a lot, but at the same time, I don't like her anywhere near as much as I like some of the other characters in these tiers. I think that she's not forgettable per se, but she's definitely not as memorable as these guys are to me. Heracles, I am putting in B tier for the same reasons as Medea. I'm putting a lot of Greeks in this tier, aren't I? But Heracles is a really cool character who, by design, doesn't really have a lot of depth to him. And that kind of holds him back, I think. I know, again, it's by design, but it's not something I can really just ignore all that well. Hassan of the Cursed Arm is a cool enough character. I'm putting him in C tier because I don't really love him and I don't really hate him. I just think he exists. And Sasuke Kojiro, I am putting in C tier for the same reasons. He doesn't really have that much depth to him. I think he's cool. I maybe would put Sasuke in B tier, but I'm putting him in C because I like some of the characters here way more than him. Emiya, I am putting in S tier because I love the layers to his writing in Unlimited Blade Works and Heaven's Feel. I think there's so much to his character in general that he's easily worth putting in S tier. He may be an A, but I'm putting him in S. Kuhlin, I want to by default put an S, but I think he's more of an A, to be real with you. I think that he's my favorite, like one of my favorite legends, but in Stay Night, I'm not going to pretend like he does a lot. I'm not going to pretend like he's not, like, somewhat poorly handled, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm not biased, and because I really love Kuhlin even outside of Fate. But he can stay in A tier. He belongs at least there. Medusa. Oh, do I want to keep with the trend of keeping every Greek in B tier? Okay, I think that Medusa belongs in B. And I say that again because Medusa is not particularly well explored in Heaven's Feel. And that's the only route where she really gets a lot of character development. I do like her. I don't love her. I don't even like her as much as some of the characters in B tier. But I do think she's definitely better than characters like, per se, Hassan of the Cursed Arm or Spartacus or Shiro. I do think she's pretty well written. I just don't think that she was explored as well as she should have been. Maybe my opinion of that will change when the Heaven's Feel Part 3 movie comes out. I don't know. I've already read the visual novel, so I don't know what they could add to make me like her more than I already do. But at the same time, I don't know. It very well could change. I actually ended up not using the E tier at all, did I? But, okay. Yeah, this is my tier list. And, again, these are all just my personal opinions. You don't have to agree with this. You don't have to disagree with it. You can think whatever you want in regards to it. I just wanted to express this, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a tier list for it. I know talking about these characters at length individually would probably make for some cool videos, but I figured this would be a good blanket way to talk about everyone in this list in a way that still let me get to everybody without needing to spend a ton of time on it. So, with that being said, good night all. I hope you enjoyed, and Patreon video will be coming later this month.